Hey everyone, it's been almost a year since my last video, but now I'm back and we're gonna live code together an app from scratch. The idea we're gonna live code is a coronavirus map using some dataset and using Mapbox for the map. We're also gonna show the pins where there are currently infected people, and then we're gonna change the marker color based on the number of infected people there. So I hope you're ready and let's get started. To start my project, I have a completely empty folder called Corona Map, and I'm gonna start with it in index.html and an app.js. And I'm going to open this with Visual Studio Code. And now I have the index.html, which is completely empty. I'm going to start with the emit exclamation mark tab, and then I'm going to say coronavirus map. And then over here, we're going to have our script, and we're going to point to app.js. Now, a couple of things first. I want to show you the app we're going to build today. It's heavily inspired from coronavirus.app, which I think is a wonderful app. It shows a map of currently infected people, and we're going to do something very similar here. Now, if you notice, we're not using any library. We're only going to use Mapbox for the map, but we're only going to need a tiny helper to be able to serve our app on localhost. So for that, I'm going to install HTTP server. And now that the HTTP server is installed, you can basically find it in your node modules.bin, and then we will have the HTTP server. But instead of running all of this, you can simply use npx, which also pulls that library even if it was not installed. And then we want to serve the current folder, so that's already a default, and we're going to go on localhost port 8080. So now let's go back over here, localhost 8080, and open DevTools, and yes, we have our app working. And if you remember, we already started with a script, so if I go back to that script, and if I make a const name equals Sam, and I go back to the page and I reload, if I write name over here, I am able to access this variable because it's running without Webpack and it's running in a normal script. Most of the times that's not what you want because we're ending up creating global variables. If you're running this file via Webpack, then you're not going to have this issue because it's going to bundle it, and every file, every JavaScript file will be completely different than the other ones. But I also like to use script type module, which is relatively new in the browsers. And now this is a module, which means this file has its own scope, and it also supports import and export without needing Webpack. So that's great. Now let's reload the page and go back. Now if I reload the page and I write name, we don't get the value. We do get an empty string. That's simply because it's reading the value of window.name, which is an empty string. We can try it with another variable, const age equals 18, and now if I reload and I write age, we will not have the age variable. I cannot even type it. Yeah, we don't have it. So now let's go back over here. I do not have the dataset for coronavirus, so I'm gonna try and see how they're pulling it. So I'm gonna open the DevTools and I'll go to the network tab, and we'll reload the page and see how they're pulling the data. So we're doing a little bit of reverse engineering here. And as I scroll down here, I can see the get latest. This is most likely returning the data that we want. You can see it in response. In preview, it's also well formatted. We've got a list of places. Let's see what that means. So this is the country China. This is a city in China. This is also another city in China. So this is the list of places. And these are the reports. And let's see here. We've got the number of people recovered, number of people infected. This is the one we're interested in. And we've got an ID, and we've got a place ID. So the way the data structure is, most likely this place ID is referring to one of the places over here. And we can also see that it's a bit of a one-to-one. And we can see here that it seems there's 118 reports and 100 and also 18 places. So there's most likely one report per place. So let's right click and then copy link address. And if I go to the console of the coronavirus.app and I run fetch, so I use the fetch API to get the data, and then that's going to give me a response. But this is a generic response. The browser doesn't know that it's JSON, it doesn't know if it's text. So we have to convert it to JSON. And if you're confused by this, this is a short syntax for arrow functions with implicit return, which is basically doing this, response.json. But we can just use the shorter syntax. I'm resolving the promises here, so because fetch returns a promise, And the JSON method itself as well returns a promise. And this is why fetch is always followed by .then, and we get the data over here. And we always want to start with the console log data, just to verify that it works. And it works over here, which is great. Now I'm going to copy this, and then go back to our app, and back to our app.javascript, save it, and go back to our page, reload, and you're going to notice it's not going to work. And we get this error, and this is the error we often see a lot when working on the web. It's a CORS issue, which we can see here, CORS, which stands for Cross-Origin Resource Sharing. And I'm going to do a video about CORS later on, but in brief, the author of coronavirus does not want anyone other than the website itself to use the API. So this is why they have not set the headers, the necessary headers that allow us to use their API. And I can see that over here. In the response headers, there should be, if they wanted to allow us to use it, there should be a access control allow origin header, but we don't have it. Well, of course, there are several ways to bypass it, like using CORS anywhere, but that's not the point of this video. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to save this file, which I can also open in a new tab. And I'm going to save it into my project, and we're going to fetch it, and we're just going to assume that this file belongs to us. It's not going to update, of course, because we just made a copy of it, but that's fine for now. And now we can go back. Just one more note on the CORS, on the cross-origin resource sharing. The problem started happening because we're not on the same domain yet. So this is a way to prevent people from abusing APIs that you've built. You can decide if you want to let other domains use it or not. Because if I call this API a million times today and a million times tomorrow, I'm not going to be the one paying for it. The one who's going to pay for the resources is the one hosting the app. And this is why we have this CORS implemented in browsers. So now let's remove this, and now our file is called getLatest.json. So that's going to be getLatest.json. Go back and see if it works. And yeah, we are getting the data. Now we know we are interested in the reports and the places, so let's go ahead and read this. We can do const places equals data.places, and then const reports equals data.reports, and we console log both of them, places and reports, and we have them over here. These are the places and these are the reports. This is perfectly fine, but we can also use a new feature in JavaScript, which is called destructuring. Instead of creating two variables on two lines, because they're both reading something within the data, we can destructure. So we use const, and then we use the curly braces syntax, and then we say we want to pull or pluck the places key and the reports key from the data object. So this line over here is equivalent to these two. So it's a const that's going to create a new variable called places, which will correspond to data.places. And then another variable reports, which will correspond to data.reports. And to verify that this works, reload the page, and we still have the same thing. Since we have the same number of reports and the same number of places, I'm going to start by looping with the reports. It doesn't really matter here. So to loop over the reports, we have a reports.forEach. And if you want to read like a full guide on for each, I've got an article on it on blog.learnjavascript.online, and you can find a link for it in the description. When we loop over reports, I always like to use singular here. So this is going to be plural, and then .for each, and then singular. It's a minor detail, but it really helps you a lot to think about the variables that you're using. And now console log report. Every time I add a couple of lines, I'm always doing console log, because I'm going from an array into, is this going to be an object? Most likely yes. So I want to visualize this. It makes things much easier. Reload. And now we will have 189 reports. We can just open any one of these. And what are we interested in? We're interested in the infected and the place ID. But you see here, there's a hide parameter false. Now, I've already looked at the dataset and they're all hide false, but let's assume some of them may be hide true in the future. So we want to start and filter out all of those that are supposed to be hidden. So we use the filter method, which is going to accept a callback here, which will give you also one report, and you're going to say filter it when the report.hide So you can do report.height is equals false, and this means it's only going to return the reports that have the height equals to false. Of course, we can write this in a shorter syntax. We start by removing the return and have an implicit return here. And then we can also, if we remove the equals false, it's going to check if it's going to be true. So then we add the bang operator, and that's going to check the opposite of it. And opposite of true is going to be false. Now let's reload the page. We're still going to have all of them. And now we can start reading some of the stuff we wanted from the report. So that's going to be const infected and place ID equals report. And we can console log this infected and place ID, see if it works. Yes, we are getting all of these. So this is the number of infected people, but where is the place? Because we have an ID and we don't really know what it means. And we have those places in the places array. So what I can do now is I sort of want to do the filter and then get the first item of it. And there's a method already for that. It's called the find method. So now I'm going to say that the current place is, and then here we're going to take the places array and call the find method. And then we're going to look for a place that has an ID that is equals, so triple equals to the place ID over here. So this is basically searching all the places until it finds the first match where the place ID, so place.id is equals to this number that we have here from the report, which is this, it's not a number actually, it's a string, this string over here. So now let's see if that works. Instead of logging the place ID, I'm going to log the current place, and that should be an object containing, yes, containing the latitude, the longitude, the country, and the name, etc. So that's great. We have all the data that we want, and now the next step is showing the map. And to show the map, you can go to Mapbox, create an account, and then you can go to your account, and you're going to have your access tokens over here. I will be deleting this one after the video because you should use your own access key. But now I can just copy this one and then go back to the JavaScript, create a variables Mapbox token equals, and then paste the code over here. Now let's go back and you can just scroll up, click on web. So I want to use the web SDK. Let's just go with the CDN, and we need to copy the script and the styles. So these will go in the HTML. We start by putting the style in the head, and then the script, we're gonna put it at the end over here. And now we will need to create a div for the map that's gonna have a width of 400 pixels, height of 300 pixels. We wanna give it different styles, so I'm gonna remove this and add some inline styles over here. And we're gonna say that the map will have a width of 100 VW, that's viewport width, and the height will be 100 VH. And this is going to be the code that will initialize our map. So now I can go back to the app.js and I can initialize the map before the fetch. And we already have that saved in a variable, so I'm going to remove it. And that's going to be called Mapbox token. So this is setting the Mapbox.jl.access token equals to the Mapbox token. If you're wondering where this is coming from, this is coming from over here. But also, yeah, why add a script here when we can use imports? So I'm just going to copy the URL, remove it, and I'm going to do the import in my app.js. And this works for two reasons. One, because it's a script type module over here. And two, because I'm not importing a library installed from NPM. This doesn't work natively in the browsers yet. You need Webpack for it. I'm importing from a URL, which could be either relative, local, or a URL hosted on the internet. Let's go back, reload the page. It works. I can now close this, but there's something horrible. We are developers, and this is using light mode. This is unacceptable. So let's go ahead and use dark mode. This is going to be basically dark and V10. Now reload. Whew. This is much better. And of course we need to zoom out. So we can give it a zoom level of say 1.5. Alright, that's great. Notice here there are some margins. We can get rid of them. These are by default coming from the browser on the body. So body margin 0. Perfect. We can also change the center a little bit and say we want to center the map on 0 and then 20. Okay, Great. And now the last two steps that we want to do is we want to put the markers, and then we want to change the color of those markers. So if I press next, let's just go to the documentation and see we're using this one, and then go to examples. And now we can look for examples on markers. Yes, create a draggable marker. We don't want it to be draggable, but that's going to be an easy fix. So that's great. Let's look at the code. They have this code over here to create the map, which we already have. And then this is the code that we need to create the marker. So let's copy this and let's go back to our app. And now for every report, we want to enter a marker. You can change that to const, but we also don't really need the reference of the marker. So let's remove it. We don't want them to be draggable, so let's remove it, but we do want to change the color later on. So let's keep the object. Before we add our own logic, let's just see if that works. Reload. Yes, we have a marker on 0, 0. And all right, so set longitude and then latitude. And then we have those already from the current place.longitude. Make sure you have the correct order, and then current place.latitude. And now it's going to be exciting. Let's close this and reload. And yes, now we have a marker wherever there is a report that someone is currently infected with the coronavirus. You can of course change the marker, you can use your own custom image, you can make it smaller, bigger. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna, as a last step, I'm gonna change the color of that marker. So I chose a bit of random numbers, but when it's above 100 infected, it's gonna be red. When it's above 10, it's gonna be blue, and then everything else will be gray. So let's go ahead and first try and see if we can just change the color easily. Just say color red. You can give RGBA or RGB colors here. Let's see if that works. Perfect, that works. So now I would create a function and say I would call it get marker color or get color from infected count, and then we give it infected, or maybe just from count, and then copy this. Go to the top and create that function, and that's gonna receive the count or the infected. And then now we can say if the count is bigger than or equals to 100, then we're gonna return red. This is gonna be the color. You don't really need an else here because you have a return, so that it's gonna quit the function if this is truthy. And then if the count is bigger than or equals to 10, then we will return blue. And then in all other cases, we're just gonna return gray. And yeah, there we have it. This is our map. And you see, wherever it's red, then there are more than 100 currently infected people. This may not be 100% up to date, but it's just really interesting to see how you can use fetch, how you can use the Mapbox API, and with just a couple of lines of code, you can create something that is useful and at the same time cool. And if you want to learn JavaScript, well, there's a reason why I disappeared for a year. I've been working on Learn JavaScript Online, which you can see over here. And I really recommend you check it out. It's going to be different than any course you've ever tried because of the way we focus on really making sure you understand things. You can recap them with flashcards. So let me show you a little bit. So there will be a link for it in the description. This is an example of the lessons. This is about fetch. We tell you how to read JSON. And you can save notes here. This is a popular note, so a lot of people have saved it. You can save this one. And if you think something is interesting, you can save it yourself, like this. Save to my notes. You can also see recaps. So in the previous chapter over here, we learned about promises. But when you learn about a lot of things, it's hard to remember everything. So we have this recap feature where you get a small recap of what you learned. You can also review that lesson. And now, when you're done from that lesson, you have to go and you have to solve that challenge. So, of course, you will not have the solution in the beginning. You have to write the code that will make the tests work. And of course, you can preview your notes. So I can go back here and see all the notes that I've taken from the previous lesson. And it doesn't stop there. There's even a flashcards app, which is supposed to be used on your phone, but you can also use it on a computer, where you can get flashcards based on the concepts that you just saw. I really think you're gonna love this. Just make sure to give it a try, and there's even more features that I have not even mentioned. So one thing that I really like is, we know that from athletes, but if you wanna be good at something, you have to have a period of stress. So for example, at the gym, this is when you work out your muscles, but then you equally need the rest. And I've kind of incorporated that here, which is when you get stuck on a challenge, it's fine, it's okay, you have to make mistakes, and this is really part of the learning experience. So what we tell you here is a good night's sleep helps to persist what you learned. So get an email reminder to solve this challenge tomorrow. And you can click on this and just stop working for today. Tomorrow morning, you're gonna get an email and you can come back to it and try to solve it. So yeah, make sure to check that out. There's a link for it in the description below, and I will see you next time.